Nearly 50 years have passed since Three's Company first aired, and the people who brought that apartment on Ridgemont Court to life went through firings, lawsuits, secret reconciliations, and endings nobody could have predicted. One of them died at 54, just 6 days before his birthday, after collapsing on the very lot where he had filmed his comeback. Another demanded equal pay to the show's male lead, and was fired within the year, blacklisted by the press as greedy. A third played the most beloved landlady on American television, while wearing a wig and quietly raising 5 children from 2 marriages that almost nobody in Hollywood ever talked about. One of the men who played their landlord arrived already carrying 5 Emmy Awards from a completely different iconic role, and his castmates admitted they were genuinely intimidated by him. And the woman who took on the most thankless job of all, replacing America's reigning sex symbol, would later call her own years on the show 3 of the worst of her life, even as audiences fell in love with her all over again. She was the 3rd woman to walk through that apartment door, and by her own account, the years she spent there were some of the unhappiest of her professional life. Priscilla Barnes played Nurse Terry Alden, the smart, composed replacement who finally gave the show's female cast a character defined by intelligence rather than ditziness. She was 27 years old when she joined in 1981, and her path to that apartment had already been anything but smooth. Priscilla Barnes was born in Fort Dix, New Jersey, the 3rd of 4 children of an Air Force major and a homemaker mother. The family moved constantly between military bases before settling in Lancaster, California. She graduated high school at 17 and relocated to San Diego, working as a waitress and a dancer to get by. Her break came when comedian Bob Hope spotted her at a local fashion show and invited her to join his USO-style troupe for a 1973 performance at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. That connection opened doors, including a small role on Peter Falk's Columbo in 1976. The same year, a photo shoot under the pseudonym Joanne Whitty for Penthouse magazine would later come back to haunt her. Barnes had actually auditioned for the original role of Chrissy Snow back in 1976 and lost the part to Suzanne Somers. 5 years later, after Somers was fired and Jenna Lee Harrison's interim run as Cindy had run its course, Barnes was cast as Terry Alden, and she has openly admitted she almost didn't take it. In a 1998 television special, she called her time on Three's Company the 3 worst years of her life, describing deep tension among the cast and an atmosphere so uncomfortable that she asked producers, unsuccessfully, to release her from the contract just episodes in. She stayed 3 full seasons regardless, appearing in 70 episodes through the 1984 series finale. After the show ended, Barnes built a steady, varied career, far from sitcom comedy. She played the doomed Della Churchill opposite Timothy Dalton in the James Bond film License to Kill in 1989, appeared in Sean Penn's The Crossing Guard with Jack Nicholson, popped up in Kevin Smith's cult comedy Mallrats, and took a memorably unsettling turn in Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects. Decades later, television audiences rediscovered her as Magda Andal on the CW's Jane the Virgin between 2014 and 2019. Through it all, she kept her closest Three's Company friendships intact, particularly with Joyce DeWitt and Richard Klein, with whom she has made joint public appearances for years. Today, in 2026, Priscilla Barnes is 71 years old, married to actor Ted Monty, and living in Glendale, California, where the couple runs a small bed and breakfast out of their home. As a teenager, long before any of it, she had originally dreamed of becoming a dancer and joined a touring preteen performance group called the Vivacious Vixens, a path that ended abruptly when a fall on stage at the Hollywood Bowl broke her leg and fractured her jaw. The woman who once called her most famous role one of the worst chapters of her life has, in the decades since, made peace with it, and with the people who shared it with her. Few performers have ever been handed a role under stranger circumstances. Jenna Lee Harrison was a 21-year-old Los Angeles Rams cheerleader with almost no acting experience when her agent called to say producers wanted to see her for a part on Three's Company, a replacement for the departing Suzanne Somers. Harrison has said for years that she walked into the audition certain she had no chance, and then tripped over something in the room. The producers loved it. They had found their klutzy farm girl cousin without even trying. Jenna Lee Harrison was born on June 12, 1958, in Northridge, California, the daughter of an aerospace engineer and a math teacher. Her parents divorced when she was 15, but she stayed close to both of them and to her siblings. She started waitressing at 14, won a string of beauty titles including Miss San Fernando Valley, and cheered for the Rams from 1978 to 1980, specifically as a way into Hollywood. It worked faster than she could have imagined. Harrison joined Three's Company in 1980 as Cindy Snow, Chrissy's klutzy farm girl cousin, a character deliberately written to mirror Somers so the show could keep using already developed scripts. For her first season, she was not even given opening credits billing, appearing as something closer to a guest star, while Somers, by then reduced to brief phone call cameos, finished out her contract. When Priscilla Barnes was brought in for the following season as a more permanent replacement, Harrison's role shrank further. And by the show's 6th season, she vanished entirely, written out without explanation, in an episode called Janet Wigs Out. What came next surprised people who had only seen her play the clumsy cousin. In 1984, Harrison joined the primetime soap Dallas as Jamie Ewing Barnes, a role substantial enough that producers killed her character off twice. Once in an explosion, and then, when the entire season turned out to be a dream sequence, all over again. She also crossed paths with her former Three's Company co-stars again, including a 1988 guest appearance opposite Suzanne Somers and Don Knotts on She's the Sheriff. In 1993, Harrison married Dr. Bruce Oppenheim, a Los Angeles chiropractor previously married to actress Sybil Shepherd. The marriage lasted nearly 30 years before ending in divorce in 2022. In her younger years, before settling down, Harrison was romantically linked to two prominent athletes, Los Angeles Rams guard Dennis Hara and baseball star Reggie Jackson. A detail fans of the show often forget, given how thoroughly the klutzy Cindy persona overtook her public image. By then, Harrison had already walked away from Hollywood almost entirely, retiring from acting in the early 2000s to devote herself to animal rescue and farming. Today, in 2026, Jenna Lee Harrison is 68 years old, living on a rural property where she raises rescue animals, including, to the delight of her social media followers, a kangaroo Joey she carries in a pouch around her neck, and running a Facebook community built around small daily acts of kindness. The girl who tripped her way into television fame found eventually a quieter and entirely different kind of life. If Three's Company had an AD, it wore a silk zebra print robe and answered to the name Larry Dallas. Richard Klein played Jack Tripper's sleazy, scheming, endlessly well-meaning best friend and neighbor for 110 episodes, the longest run of any character besides Jack himself, across the original series and both of its spin-offs. He was 32 years old when the show began, and almost nothing about his own life resembled the character he is still best remembered for. Richard Klein, born Richard Klein, came into the world on April 29, 1944, in New York City, raised in Queens by a Reformed Jewish family. He earned a Master of Fine Arts in Theater from Northwestern University, then served as a lieutenant in the United States Army during the Vietnam War, where, by his own account, he survived being struck by lightning during a severe storm. After returning home, he threw himself into serious theater, making his professional stage debut in 1971 with the Lincoln Center Repertory Company and working alongside future television veterans like Dennis Franz in regional productions of Death of a Salesman and Love's Labor's Lost. Larry Dallas, the used car salesman in The Gold Medallion who lived to chase women and scheme with Jack, became Klein's defining role, but it never defined the rest of his career the way it did for some castmates. He went on to build a long and varied resume that included directing work and recurring or guest roles on shows ranging from Saint Elsewhere and L.A. Law to Married, with Children, and That 70s Show. He also found a second home on Broadway as a classically trained singer, debuting in the 1989 musical City of Angels, and decades later, joining the national tour and Broadway cast of Waitress. Klein has remained one of the most visibly active members of the original cast in later years, reuniting with Joyce DeWitt, Jenna Lee Harrison, and Priscilla Barnes at fan conventions and reprising musical theater roles well into his 70s. Including a turn as Kid Twist in a 2018 production of The Sting. His connection to the show's old guard ran even into the next generation. His daughter, Colby Klein, would go on to play a neighbor's child in a Problem Child film that coincidentally starred his old friend and co-star John Ritter. Today in 2026, Richard Klein is 82 years old, married to Beverly Osgood, living in New Jersey, and still teaching acting classes in New York City. The man who played television's most lovable hustler has spent the decades since quietly proving himself one of the hardest working character actors of his generation. She wore a wig to play a woman whose marriage had gone stale, and in doing so became one of the most beloved characters of the entire series. Audra Lindley's Helen Roper, sharp-tongued, sexually frustrated, hopelessly devoted to a husband who barely noticed her, anchored the show's first 3 seasons before becoming the centerpiece of its own spin-off. Lindley was 58 years old when the series began, the oldest member of the original, cast by nearly 2 decades, and her path to television fame had already wound through Broadway, daytime soaps, and a quiet career raising 5 children. Audra Marie Lindley was born on September 24, 1918, in Los Angeles, the daughter of stage and film actor Burt Lindley. She began in show business as a stand-in and stunt performer before deciding the work was not for her, then headed to New York in her 20s to study serious theater. She appeared on Broadway in productions including On Golden Pond and Long Day's Journey into Night, and stepped away from acting for years at a time to raise her children, 5 of them across 2 marriages, the first to Hardy Ulm, who passed away in 1970, and the second from 1972 to 1979 to fellow actor James Whitmore. By the time Three's Company cast her as Helen Roper in 1977, Lindley already had a long resume in daytime television, including a 5-year run on the soap opera Another World. Her chemistry with co-star Norman Fell, playing a couple whose marriage had curdled into mutual exasperation laced with genuine affection, became one of the show's most reliable sources of both comedy and warmth. When the two were spun off into their own series, The Ropers, in 1979, it was not the success anyone hoped for, lasting only 2 seasons before cancellation. Lindley kept working steadily afterward, in projects as varied as the horror comedy Revenge of the Stepford Wives, a memorable turn as the Madame Fauna in 1982's Cannery Row, and a recurring role late in life as Phoebe Buffay's grandmother on Friends. She also appeared in 1989's Troop Beverly Hills as the outspoken director of a wilderness scouting group, and made a final genre detour into horror with an appearance on Tales from the Crypt. Her final regular television role was as Sybil Shepherd's mother on the sitcom Sybil in the mid-1990s, a part she had actually played once before, decades earlier, in the 1972 film The Heartbreak Kid. Audra Lindley died of complications from leukemia on October 16, 1997, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, at the age of 79. Her ashes were laid to rest near her parents at Woodlawn Memorial Cemetery in Santa Monica. The woman who turned a stale marriage into comic gold left behind a body of work that stretched across more than 5 decades of American television and stage. Before there was Mr. Furley, there was Mr. Roper. And to a generation of viewers, Norman Fell's irritable, perpetually suspicious landlord was the original gatekeeper, standing between Jack Tripper and his next disaster. Fell played Stanley Roper for the show's first 3 seasons, eyeing his tenants with permanent distrust while fending off the unwanted advances of his own wife. He was 52 years old when the series premiered, already a veteran of more than 3 decades in front of the camera. Norman Fell, born Norman Noah Feld, and billed under that name early in his career, came into the world on March 24, 1924, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the son of an Austrian Jewish immigrant father and a mother with Russian Jewish roots. During World War II, he served as a tail gunner with the United States Army Air Forces in the Pacific Theater, where he was credited with 2 confirmed kills against Japanese fighter aircraft, a wartime record almost entirely at odds with the fussy, henpecked character that would later make him famous. After the war, he studied drama at Temple University and trained at the legendary Actors Studio and the Black Hills Players. Long before Three's Company, Fell had already built a substantial film career, playing exactly the kind of suspicious authority figures he would later be remembered for, most notably as the landlord Mr. McCleary, hunting for any excuse to evict Dustin Hoffman's character in 1967's The Graduate. He also appeared in Ocean's 11 alongside the original Rat Pack and in Steve McQueen's Bullet. His dramatic range was real. He earned an Emmy nomination for his performance as a boxing trainer in the acclaimed miniseries Rich Man, Poor Man. But it was the comedic landlord role that the public never let him escape. Fell won a Golden Globe for his performance as Stanley Roper. And when he and Audra Lindley were spun off into The Ropers in 1979, it briefly looked like the character might carry his own show. It didn't last. Fell married Dolores Picus in 1950, and the couple remained together for the rest of his life, raising two daughters, Tracy and Mara. Fell's final on-screen appearance as the character came as a cameo on the sitcom Ellen in 1997, nearly 20 years after the role first made him a household name. Norman Fell died of cancer on December 14, 1998, at the Motion Picture and Television Fund's retirement home in Woodland Hills, California, at the age of 74. His business manager said it plainly at the time. However vast the body of work, the public only ever wanted to call him Mr. Roper. On the street, in interviews, everywhere he went, for the rest of his life. When the Ropers left the building, the show needed someone bigger, stranger, and far more eccentric to fill the landlord's shoes. And producers found him in one of the most beloved comedic actors in American television history. Don Knotts arrived as Ralph Furley in 1979, already a 5-time Emmy winner for an entirely different iconic role, and turned what was meant to be a minor recurring part into one of the show's most memorable characters. He was 55 years old when he joined the cast. Yamai Jesse Donald Knotts was born on July 21, 1924, in Morgantown, West Virginia, the youngest of 4 sons in a household marked by hardship. His father, a farmer who suffered from severe mental illness and alcoholism, had once threatened the family with a knife and died of pneumonia when Knotts was just 13. Knotts found his escape in performance, working as a ventriloquist and comedian during World War II as part of an Army variety show touring the Pacific. After the war, he completed a degree in education and slowly worked his way into television and Broadway, where a production of No Time for Sergeants first paired him with a young actor named Andy Griffith. That partnership became the defining one of Knotts' career. As Deputy Barney Fife on The Andy Griffith Show, he won 5 Emmy Awards and became, by some measures, the most celebrated supporting comedic actor in television history. He also built a substantial film career through the 1960s and 70s in Disney comedies like The Incredible Mr. Limpet and The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, even as he privately struggled for years with severe hypochondria and a degenerative eye disease that he rarely discussed publicly. By the time he joined Three's Company as the lecherous, leisure suit-clad Ralph Furley, a landlord who believed himself a smooth ladies' man and was almost never aware of how wrong he was. The rest of the cast was, as John Ritter later put it, genuinely intimidated by working alongside a legend of that caliber. When Suzanne Somers departed the show, much of the material originally written for her character was quietly redirected to Knotts Furley instead, and he carried that comic weight for the remainder of the series. Knotts and John Ritter remained close friends for the rest of Ritter's life. He attended Ritter's funeral in 2003, just 4 days after his former co-star's sudden death, having appeared alongside him one final time in a cameo just a year earlier on 8 Simple Rules. In the years after Three's Company, Knotts found an unexpected late-career resurgence, including a widely praised dramatic turn as a mysterious television repairman in 1998's Pleasantville. His daughter, actress Karen Knotts, has spent much of her own career honoring her father's legacy through stage tributes and public appearances. Don Knotts died on February 24, 2006, in Los Angeles, of complications from pulmonary and respiratory illness related to lung cancer at the age of 81. He was, by his own admission, most proud of Barney Fife above every other role he ever played. But for an entire generation who grew up watching reruns, the absurd, overconfident landlord of Apartment 201 will always be just as unforgettable. She became one of the most recognizable faces of 1970s American television, and then was fired from the show that made her famous after asking to be paid what her male co-star was already earning. Suzanne Somers played Chrissy Snow, the bubbly, naive blonde roommate, for the show's first 4 seasons, becoming a genuine sex symbol and household name in the process. She was 30 years old when the series began, and the fallout from her departure would follow her for the rest of her career. Suzanne Marie Mahoney was born on October 16, 1946, in San Bruno, California, the third of 4 children in a working-class Irish-American Catholic family marked by her father's alcoholism. She got her start with a small, wordless role in 1973's American Graffiti, mouthing, "I love you," from inside a white Thunderbird. A moment she later said changed the entire course of her life. Before that breakthrough, in 1971, her young son was seriously injured after being struck by a car, and struggling to cover his hospital bills, she did a test nude photo session for Playboy, later suing the magazine over the unauthorized publication of those photos and eventually winning payment for them. After scattered television appearances through the 1970s, she was cast as Chrissy Snow just before the third and final pilot of Three's Company was taped on the recommendation of an ABC executive who had seen her on The Tonight Show. The conflict that ended her run on the series became one of the most publicized labor disputes in 1970s television. Heading into the 5th season, Somers, backed by her husband and manager Alan Hamill, demanded a raise from $30,000 to $150,000 per episode, matching what John Ritter was reportedly paid, along with 10% of the show's profits. The network refused. Somers missed 2 tapings in protest. Her role was drastically reduced to brief phone call cameos for the remainder of the season, and she was let go entirely once it ended. She sued the producers for $2 million and received only a fraction of what she had asked for. The public reaction at the time was largely unkind, and it took her years to rebuild steady acting work. She found it eventually with Step by Step, opposite Patrick Duffy, and built a second, even larger career as a businesswoman and wellness author, most famously as the spokesperson for the Thigh Master exercise device, which she said earned her nearly $300 million over the years. She also wrote more than 25 books, including the candid 1988 memoir, Keeping Secrets, and at age 68, competed on Dancing with the Stars in 2015. Decades after their very public falling out, Somers and Joyce DeWitt finally reconciled on Somers' online talk show in 2012, the first time the two had spoken in over 30 years. Both women had also separately made peace with John Ritter before his death, Somers visiting him at his hospital bedside in his final hours. Suzanne Somers died of breast cancer at her home in Palm Springs, California on October 15, 2023, at the age of 76, one day before what would have been her 77th birthday, after surviving the disease for more than 2 decades. The dumb blonde stereotype she was hired to play, and ultimately punished for outgrowing, never came close to capturing who she actually was. She was the quiet anchor of the entire show, the sensible, grounded roommate who kept her 2 chaotic friends tethered to reality episode after episode. Joyce DeWitt played Janet Wood for all 8 seasons of Three's Company, never missing more than a single episode across the show's entire run, and remains today the last surviving member of the original 3 lead actors. She was 27 years old when the series began. Joyce Ann DeWitt was born on April 23, 1949, in Wheeling, West Virginia, and grew up in Speedway, Indiana, a suburb of Indianapolis. She began performing on stage at 13, competed in speech and debate throughout high school, and earned a theater degree from Ball State University before heading to UCLA for a master's degree in drama. While working as a legal secretary between auditions, she was offered a choice between 2 competing ABC comedy pilots with only 24 hours to decide. She chose the one about a man living platonically with 2 women. The other pilot never aired at all. DeWitt's relationship with the show was never entirely simple. In 1979, she briefly walked off the set in protest after the network attempted to rescind a promised raise, telling producers she was, in her own words, sick at heart, sick in the soul, a stand that ultimately got her raise reinstated. She has also spoken candidly about her famous on-set rule. She refused to perform with bare legs, always wearing pantyhose or tights, a decision that eventually made her a paid spokesperson for Legs Hosiery. Her favorite episode of the entire series was Up in the Air, remembered for a long, Emmy-nominated comic dance from John Ritter. One of her least favorite was Janet Wigs Out, the very episode that wrote Jenna Lee Harrison's character off the show. Her falling out with Suzanne Somers during the salary dispute of 1980 ran deep enough that the two women did not speak for 31 years. In an odd footnote from the same period, DeWitt once auditioned to play one of Fonzie's girlfriends on Happy Days and was turned down for looking too young and too short, only to land the role of Janet Wood within weeks. After the series ended in 1984, DeWitt largely walked away from screen acting, traveling extensively before settling for years in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and devoting most of her career since to regional and touring theater, including productions of Love Letters and Dinner with Friends. In 2003, she returned to the spotlight as co-producer and on-screen host of the television film Behind the Camera, The Unauthorized Story of Three's Company. In July 2009, she was arrested for driving under the influence in El Segundo, California, and the following year completed a court-ordered alcoholism prevention program. A difficult chapter she has rarely discussed publicly since. In recent years, she has continued working steadily on stage, including a turn in a Waffle House-themed Christmas musical called Scattered, Smothered, and Covered Christmas. Today, in 2026, Joyce DeWitt is 77 years old, continuing to perform on regional stages across the country, and remains, by all accounts, fiercely private about the life she has built outside of the role that made her famous nearly 5 decades ago. And finally, him. The man without whom Three's Company simply does not exist. John Ritter's Jack Tripper, the aspiring chef who pretended to be gay so his conservative landlord would let him share an apartment with 2 women, turned a borrowed British premise into one of the defining American sitcoms of its era through sheer physical comedy and genuine warmth. He was 28 years old when the series began, and he came to it already carrying the weight of a famous name he had spent his whole career trying to step out from under. Jonathan Southworth Ritter was born on September 17, 1948, in Burbank, California, the son of singing cowboy and film star Tex Ritter and actress Dorothy Faye. He attended Hollywood High School, where he served as student body president, and went on to the University of Southern California to study psychology and architecture before a drama class taught by Nina Foch redirected the entire course of his life. He spent a stretch performing on European stages in the late 1960s before returning home to build a steady run of guest appearances on shows including The Mary Tyler Moore Show, The Waltons, and MASH. His father died in early January 1974, while Ritter was working on The Waltons, just a year before the role that would change everything came his way. In 1983, the year before his Emmy win, Ritter was given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, placed deliberately next to his father's. Ritter beat out roughly 50 other actors, including a then-unknown Billy Crystal, for the role of Jack Tripper in 1976. The first pilot, with different actresses in the female leads, was scrapped and reworked before Joyce DeWitt and then Suzanne Somers were brought aboard for a third and final attempt that finally clicked. The premise: 3 single roommates sharing a Santa Monica apartment, with Jack pretending to be gay to satisfy his landlord, became an immediate hit, and Ritter's manic, often genuinely athletic physical comedy made him the show's undisputed center. He earned 3 consecutive Emmy nominations before finally winning Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series in 1984, the show's final season, alongside a Golden Globe win earlier that same year. His personal life moved alongside his career. He married actress Nancy Morgan in October 1977, just months after the show's premiere, and the couple had 3 children before divorcing in 1996. He later reconnected with actress Amy Yazbek, whom he had met on the set of Problem Child 2, and the two married in September 1999, welcoming a daughter, Stella, the year before their wedding. After Three's Company, Ritter built a substantial career beyond sitcom comedy, including a second Golden Globe win for the cop dramedy Hooperman in 1989, a Tony Award nomination for his Broadway work in 2000, a dramatic turn in 1996's Sling Blade, voice work as the title character on PBS's Clifford the Big Red Dog, that earned him 4 Daytime Emmy nominations, and the lead role on ABC's 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, which earned him a second wind of mainstream popularity at the start of the 2000s. On September 11, 2003, while rehearsing for the second season of 8 Simple Rules at the Walt Disney Studios lot in Burbank, directly across the street from the hospital where he had been born nearly 55 years earlier. Ritter suddenly fell ill with chest pain, sweating, and nausea. He was rushed to that same hospital, initially treated for what doctors believed was a heart attack, and only later correctly diagnosed with an aortic dissection. He died that evening at the age of 54, just 6 days before what would have been his 55th birthday, and exactly 5 years to the day after his daughter Stella's birth. His widow Amy Yazbek later sued the medical team involved in his care, ultimately settling for $14 million, and went on to found the John Ritter Foundation for Aortic Health, which has spent more than 2 decades since raising awareness about a condition with a higher fatality rate than most heart attacks or strokes. The man who built a career out of falling down, getting back up, and making it look effortless left behind a legacy that, in the end, helped save the lives of others facing exactly the danger that took his own. There it is, the entire world that existed just behind that apartment door on Ridgemont Court. Firings and reconciliations decades in the making, a landlord couple who became comedy legends, and a successor who very nearly outshone them both. A leading man gone far too soon, and a quiet, private woman who outlasted them all. But every one of these stories belongs to the same larger one, about how 8 years in front of a studio audience can echo for nearly 50 more, and about the enormous gap between the characters we thought we knew, and the complicated, resilient people who went home after the cameras stopped rolling. Tell us in the comments, which of these stories surprised you most? And where in the world are you watching from today? If you want to keep finding the real stories behind the classic shows and the people who created them, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. Every week, we go past the legend and into the life.